Welcome back to the deep dive. I hope you are sitting down for this one. Actually, do me a favor. Reach out and knock on the table or the desk in front of you. Or if you're driving, just tap the steering wheel.
It feels pretty solid, doesn't it?
It feels incredibly solid. It feels, undeniable.
Hmm.
And that is exactly the problem we are going to try and solve today. Because for the next hour or so, we're going to completely dismantle that table.
Yeah.
The car you're driving, the chair you're in, and pretty much everything you think of as reality.
It is certainly a journey today. We're looking at a very specific slice of history and philosophy that really challenges just about everything we take for granted from the very moment we open our eyes in the morning.
Exactly. We are diving back into the Seth Material. Specifically, we are looking at session 285 of the early sessions, book 7. And this was recorded on September 12, 1966.
Right. And honestly, this session is a perfect microcosm of what makes the Seth Material so incredibly unique. Usually when you get into metaphysics or high-level philosophy, it stays very abstract. It's all clouds and theory.
Right. It gets a bit fluty.
Exactly.
But this session, it's this weird, wonderful collision of high-level quantum philosophy, decades before physics really caught up to it, honestly, and a letter to a local dentist.
It does sound like the setup for a bad joke, right? A non-physical entity and a dentist walk into a bar.
But that's the beauty of it. We are going to talk about the fundamental fabric of the universe, and then we are going to try and guess the architectural layout of a dentist's office in 1966 New York. It's the cosmic meeting, the totally mundane.
Before we slip fully into that rabbit hole, though, we do have some essential housekeeping. We need to declare right up top that this podcast is distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes. We are here to learn, to explore, and to just share this wild information.
Absolutely. We aren't selling you the secrets of the universe here. We are literally just reading the manual together. And speaking of the manual, we really have to give a massive amount of credit to the source material. The Seth Material is published by the New Awareness Network.
And if what we talk about today rings a bell, or maybe rings an entire cathedral of bells in your head, you owe it to yourself to go directly to the source. Summaries are great, but the primary text is where the real magic happens.
Yeah, you can find these books and support the preservation of this material by visiting the New Awareness Network website and bookstore at sethcenter.com/the early sessions. We'll remind you again at the end, but seriously, go check it out.
So, are we ready to peel back the wallpaper of reality?
Let's do it. The hook for today is this. If you have ever felt like the world is just a stage or a simulation, or that there is something buzzing just beneath the surface of the drywall, Seth explains exactly why you feel that way in this session.
And our mission today is to understand two main things. First, Seth's concept of root assumptions, how our physical senses are actually a sophisticated camouflage system.
Right.
And second, we're going to see a real-time demonstration of ESP that involves jungle gyms, Gregorian chants, and a very specific architectural mix-up that actually proves telepathy more than if you'd gotten it right.
I love that part so much, the failure that actually proves the success. But let's start with the heavy lifting. Segment 1, unpacking root assumptions.
This really creates the foundation for everything else we're going to talk about.
Now, this phrase, root assumptions, it comes up a lot in the Seth Material.
Yeah.
But in session 285, he really lays it out clearly. When I hear assumption, I think of, I assume it's going to rain today. But that's not what he means, is it?
No, not at all. It's much more fundamental than that. Think of root assumptions as the ground rules of a game engine. If you sit down to play chess, you agree that the bishop moves diagonally.
Right, you don't argue with the board.
You don't question it, yeah. It's just how the universe of chess operates. If you sit down to play physical human existence, you agree to certain root assumptions. That time moves forward, that objects are solid, that space separates us from one another, and that gravity holds us down.
So it's not that gravity or time are these absolute immutable laws of the cosmos. They're the house rules.
Exactly. They are the house rules of this specific dimension. Seth defines them as the basic premises upon which a given existence system is formed. He says, and I think this is a really crucial quote to ground us, your physical mechanisms are equipped to function in such a way that reality is perceived through the lens of particular root assumptions.
Through the lens. That is the key image for me. It's like we are all wearing those virtual reality goggles. The software, meaning our brain and our nervous system, is programmed to only show us the game. You can't take the goggles off, so you just assume the game is the only thing that exists.
That is a perfect analogy. And because we are inside the headset, we physically cannot perceive reality in any other way. We are, as he puts it, highly specialized observers.
But hold on, though. I get the headset analogy, but it feels a bit, I don't know, a bit matrixy, a bit cold and trapped. Seth isn't saying we're trapped in a machine against our will, is he? It feels more organic than that.
No, you're right to push back on that vibe. It's not a prison at all. It's a creation. Seth says we actually agree to these rules. We aren't victims of the headset. We designed it because we wanted to play this specific game.
We bought the ticket, we take the ride.
Precisely. We wanted to experience what it feels like to be separate, to be physical, to manipulate matter.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But here is where it gets tricky for me. We obviously have dreams. We have intuition. We have those weird, spooky moments where we think of an old friend and suddenly they call us on the phone. That doesn't fit the physics of the game.
And that is exactly where the conflict arises. Seth points out that we constantly try to force those inner experiences, the dreams, the psychic flashes into the framework of our physical root assumptions. We try to measure them with physical rulers.
Like trying to weigh a ghost on a bathroom scale.
Yes, that's exactly it. And because the ghost doesn't register on the physical scale, we call it chaotic or meaningless, or we just dismiss it as a hallucination. Seth says, the inner senses are not bound by those root assumptions. When you have a psychic experience, it feels weird only because you are judging it by the wrong rulebook. You are trying to apply the laws of matter to the laws of consciousness.
This part really struck me in the reading. Seth talks about how this isn't just a mental habit. It's not just psychology. It's biological. We are physically trained to see the world this way.
Yes, trained from infancy. And this is where we need to get a little technical for a moment, because Seth gets really granular here. He talks about visual block images.
Yeah, I circled that phrase 3 times in my notes. Visual block images. It sounds like something from a 1990s computer graphics manual.
In a way it is. Seth explains that our eyes, the physical organs in our head, do not actually see depth. They don't see space.
Wait, explain that. Because if I look at the corner of the room right now, I clearly see that the chair is closer than the wall behind it. I see 3D space.
Seth argues that you don't actually see it, you construct it. Your retina receives a flat pattern of light and color, a two-dimensional mosaic. That is the raw data hitting your biological sensors.
Like a digital camera sensor. A camera doesn't inherently know distance, it just knows the pixels hitting it.
Exactly. But your brain, which has been relentlessly trained since you're a baby trying to grab a rattle, instantly runs a complex algorithm. It looks at the shading, the size of the objects relative to each other, the overlap, and it says, okay, that darker shade means the object is further away. We are constantly hallucinating 3D space onto a 2D data stream.
So the space between me and you, the physical distance, isn't actually empty space, it's a mental calculation.
Seth calls it a psychic structure. He says, the sense of space is giving you to allow you to manipulate these objects. It's a user interface.
A UI.
Exactly. It's the desktop on your computer.
Mm-hmm.
You organize your files into folders, not because the files are actually inside little yellow manila folders inside your hard drive, but because your brain needs that visual metaphor to handle the data.
That's unsettling. Because it implies that if I could somehow stop that processing, if I could stop the learning we did as babies, the world would look completely different.
It would look like chaos, or, more accurately, it would look like pure energy. Seth says this organization is, biologically speaking, artificial and learned. We aren't hardwired to see the world this way. We are taught to see the world this way for our own survival.
Survival creates the illusion.
Precisely. You need to know that the tiger is over there 50 feet away and not inside you, so you can run away from it. If you saw the tiger as just a beautiful swirl of cosmic energy connected to your own energy field, you might not run fast enough.
Yeah, you just stand there admiring the oneness right before you got eaten.
Right. So we trade the truth of unity for the utility of separation.
I love that phrase. We trade truth for utility. But if this structure is learned, that heavily implies it can be unlearned, or at least shaken up temporarily. Which brings us directly to the context of the 1960s.
Oh yes, segment 2. You really can't talk about 1966 and altering human perception without talking about LSD.
It's practically mandatory for the era. And Seth actually brings it up directly in this session. Remember, in '66, psychedelic experimentation was just starting to hit the mainstream. Timothy Leary, the counterculture people, were desperately looking for exactly what we're talking about right now, a way to see past the camouflage.
And what's fascinating is Seth's specific take on it. He doesn't dismiss it as just kids getting high. He treats it seriously as a chemical intervention in the perception mechanism.
So does he say it works? Is he a fan of taking the chemical shortcut?
It's very nuanced. He admits that they do work. He says recent LSD experiments show that the organizational structure of perception can indeed be broken up. It literally proves that our view of the world is artificial because a tiny amount of chemistry can completely dissolve it.
But there is a massive but coming here, isn't there?
A massive but. He warns that it is highly dangerous. He says indiscriminate use of the psychedelic drugs can severely shake up learned patterns of response. Ego failure may result.
Ego failure. That sounds terminal. What does he actually mean by ego failure?
It's about the sheer violence of the shift. Think about the VR headset analogy again. If you want to stop the simulation, you should probably take the headset off gently. Or maybe pause the software first.
Right. Let your eyes adjust.
Exactly. LSD, in Seth's view, is like ripping the headset off your face while the software is still running at max capacity, or maybe short-circuiting the computer with a massive power surge. You sweep away your inner stability. The nervous system goes into total shock because it's suddenly processing raw data it hasn't been trained to handle.
So the ego, which is basically the pilot of our physical experience, panics.
It absolutely panics. The ego is your anchor in this reality. It's the part of you that knows your name, knows where you live, and knows that gravity works. If you strip away all those root assumptions, gravity, time, self, in a split second, the ego loses its footing. It's not a gentle expansion. It's an explosion.
Okay, so if we want to see the real reality, the energy behind a camouflage, but we don't want to fry our hard drives with acid, what is the alternative? Seth proposes something called psychological time.
Yes. Psychological time, or psi time as it's often called, is a recurring exercise throughout the Seth material. It's presented as the safe, natural alternative to the chemical shortcut.
How does it work? Is it just traditional meditation?
It's similar to meditation, but with a very specific, targeted goal. You deliberately tune out physical stimuli, you close your eyes, you quiet the physical senses, but unlike falling asleep, you remain sharply alert.
And what's the key difference regarding the ego here?
In psi time, Seth says the ego consents to step aside momentarily. It's not being bombed into submission by a chemical. It's politely being asked to wait in the hall for a few minutes.
That feels so much safer. It's the difference between blowing the front door off its hinges with dynamite versus just turning the handle and taking a peek outside.
And the ultimate goal is to perceive the spacious present, to experience concepts and energies directly without needing to translate them into symbols or physical objects.
Okay, you just mentioned symbols. That is the perfect bridge to segment 3. Because this is where the session pivots from this lofty, high-level theory to the actual boots-on-the-ground experiment. Seth drops this incredible line, objects are symbols.
It's a profound statement, and it perfectly links the philosophy to the dentist letter we're about to discuss.
Right.
We naturally think objects are things. We think a chair is just a chair. But Seth argues that in both our dreams and our waking physical life, objects are just representations of inner data.
Going back to the computer analogy, it's like the icons on a desktop.
Exactly. The little trash can icon on your screen isn't actually a physical trash can. It doesn't have a plastic lid. It's a cluster of illuminated pixels that represents a command line in the underlying code to delete a file.
So a chair isn't just a chair. It's a symbol of sitting, of support.
In a way, yes. It's a symbol of a specific set of molecular agreements that our physical senses translate into the image of a chair. We create the physical object to make the raw energy understandable and usable for our ego.
And this leads us to the transition of the session. If objects are just symbols, then reading an object, like reading a sealed letter inside an envelope, isn't about seeing the physical paper with Superman X-ray vision.
No, not at all. If you use X-ray vision, you're still playing by the physical rules. You're just seeing through the paper envelope. Seth is doing something completely different. He is reading the symbols and the emotional energy attached to the object. He is bypassing the physical camouflage entirely.
Which brings us to the fun part, segment 4, the envelope experiment.
The setup here is just delightful. We have Jane Roberts sitting in a trance, speaking as Seth. We have her husband, Reb, sitting nearby, taking meticulous notes. And the target object for the night's psychic test is a draft of a letter Rob wrote to a local dentist.
Dr. Laudico, I just love the specificity of this. Rob is trying to sell this dentist some abstract paintings for his waiting room.
It brilliantly grounds the whole thing, doesn't it? You have this vast, multidimensional entity discussing the very fabric of space-time, and then it's like, so about that invoice for the dentist down the street. It reminds us that spirituality isn't just about sitting on mountaintops. It's intimately tied to paying the bills and going to dentist appointments.
So true. So Jane, or Seth, channeling through Jane,
Oh.
holds this sealed envelope up to her forehead or holds it in her hand. She has not seen this letter. Rob wrote it while she was in a completely different room.
Yeah.
What does Seth pick up first?
The very first impression he gets is the phrase array or disarray.
Which is funny because it's a rough draft of a letter. Right?
Exactly. It's a messy first draft full of crossed out words, scribbles, margin corrections. It is physically in a state of disarray. But Seth also links the concept of disarray to the actual content of the letter, which is abstract art. To many people, especially maybe a dentist in the 60s, abstract art looks like disarray or chaos compared to a nice traditional landscape painting.
That's a brilliant double hit. He gets the physical state of the paper and the conceptual nature of the topic being discussed.
Then we get into the shapes. Seth starts saying geometric, 4 squares, cubes.
Which perfectly describes the actual paintings Rob is trying to sell to him. They were cubist-style abstracts.
Right. But here's where it gets fascinatingly specific to the medium, meaning Jane herself. Seth says this imagery reminds Rupert, that's his inner name, for Jane of Jungle Gyms at a playground.
Now wait, why would an ancient or interdimensional entity care about playgrounds and jungle gyms? This is a really interesting peek into how the mechanics of channeling actually work, right?
It is a textbook example of how ESP works through psychological association. Seth perceives the pure energy of the geometric shapes of the art, the cubes, the intersecting lines, but he has to communicate that raw concept through Jane's physical brain. He has to use her vocabulary and her memories.
So he essentially goes fishing in her memory bank.
Exactly. He grabs a matching file from her subconscious. Jane has a childhood memory and actually a specific photograph of herself playing on a very distinct jungle gym in Saratoga Springs. The geometric shapes of the playground match the energy of the paintings. So Seth says, it's like that jungle gym.
So he's using her vocabulary, her personal memories, as a sort of decoder ring. He sees the concept of intersecting squares. She has a memory of a jungle gym, and he says, it's like that jungle gym.
It shows that channeling isn't just a simple dictation machine. It's a deeply collaborative translation process. He is interpreting multidimensional energy into Jane's specific physical symbols.
Okay, moving on to the next hit in the envelope reading. Seth starts talking about opera and music.
And at first, Rob and Jane are totally confused by this. A letter to a local dentist about buying a painting doesn't exactly scream opera.
But there's a hidden connection.
A very deep one. The letter mentions a past art exhibit at a place called Mount Savior. Mount Savior is a monastery. Jane and Rob know it very well. And what is Mount Savior famous for?
Gregorian chants.
The sung mass, yes. Seth later clarifies that the opera impression was simply his closest way of describing the sung mass. Again, he's grasping through Jane's database for a symbol that means dramatic, vocal music in a grand setting, and lands on opera or music.
That is wild. The letter itself didn't say the words Gregorian chants, but the location mentioned in the letter held that specific energy and association for them, and Seth picked up on that underlying energy.
It shows he isn't just reading the physical ink on the text of the letter. He's reading the associations and the mental implications of the words. He is reading the mind of the writer, not just the paper.
But now we really have to get to the main event, the miss that was actually the biggest hit of the entire night. This is the story of the flat roof building.
This is undoubtedly the highlight of the session for me. It completely flips the script on what we assume ESP actually is.
Set the scene for us. Seth starts describing the physical location of the dentist's office.
Right. Seth is standing the target, and he says, I see a small building. It has a flattish roof. It's orange or light-colored in the sunlight. I see scroll shapes or banners outside.
And Rob, sitting there taking his notes, is just nodding his head enthusiastically. He's thinking, yes, that's the medical building down the street. That's exactly where Dr. Lodico is.
Rob is 100% convinced. He has been picturing this specific building all night while writing the draft letter. He visualized the dentist working inside that specific flat-roofed building with the scroll work.
So the session ends, high fives all around. They decide to actually walk down the street to verify it in person.
It's late at night. They walk a few blocks through town. They get to the flat-roofed building, and Dr. Lodico's name is nowhere on the door.
Womp womp.
They check the directory. Nothing. It's a chiropodist or something completely unrelated.
That must have been so deflating after such a great session.
They look around totally confused. And then they spot it. Dr. Lodico's actual office is across the street, in a totally normal, standard two-story house. Conventional peaked roof. No scrolls anywhere, no orange stone.
So scientifically speaking, if you're grading a test, that's a fail, right?
Yeah.
Seth described the wrong physical building.
If you are testing for remote viewing of strict physical coordinates, yes, it's a complete miss. But if you are testing for telepathy, it is an absolute bullseye.
Because Seth didn't see the actual building. He saw what Rob thought was the building.
Precisely. Rob held a very strong mental image of that flat-roofed building in his mind, genuinely believing it to be the dentist's office. Seth read Rob's mind. He described Rob's root assumption of where the dentist was, not the physical reality of the street.
That is genuinely chilling, because it implies that to Seth, a thought form, a purely mental image in someone's head is just as visible, and maybe even more visible, than a literal physical brick wall.
It completely validates everything Seth said in the first half of the session. Objects are symbols. Rob's thought of the building was a symbol. Seth read the symbol perfectly. The fact that the physical world didn't match Rob's thought was entirely irrelevant to the telepathic connection.
It's like Seth was hacking into Rob's internal monitor instead of looking through the external security camera.
And they realized this immediately once they saw the real office. It confirmed that the connection was mind to mind. It's a wonderful reminder that when we deal with ESP or consciousness, we are dealing with an interconnected web of mental energy, not just a physical radar system bouncing off objects.
It really makes you reevaluate what's real. Now, there were a few other funny little glitches in the transmission too that night, sort of telephone game aspects.
Yes, the word acrimony. Seth hears the sound acrimony, and he pauses and guesses, Akron, Ohio.
I laughed out loud reading that. You have this incredibly wise, multidimensional teacher, and he's basically playing a game of charades with Jane's vocal cords. That's like acrimony, Akron.
It wonderfully humanizes the process. It shows that information comes through as raw data, a sound, an image, a feeling, and the human channeler has to actively interpret it in real time. Sometimes the phonetic wires just get crossed.
And then there was the name game. Seth gets 7 letters and an A.
Right. The dentist's name is Lodico, which is only 6 letters. But the friend who introduced Rob to the dentist was a man named Andy Colucci. Colucci has 7 letters. First name Andy, which starts with an A.
So he was picking up the broader network of people involved in the transaction, the social energy web, not just the name on the envelope.
Exactly. The whole web of connections surrounding the object.
So as we move toward synthesizing all of this, what does this all mean for us today?
Well, if we zoom out and look at the whole hour, we have a perfect narrative arc in this single session. We start with the dense theory. Reality is a construct, perceptions biologically learned, and physical objects are merely symbols of inner data.
And we end with a highly practical demonstration where a physical building, a massive concrete object, turns out to be less real to the psychic senses than a mistaken thought in a guy's head.
It literally proves the theory in real time. Seth couldn't have set up a better test if he tried. Think about it. If he had just correctly described the actual office across the street, it would have been impressive, sure, but it would just be standard clairvoyance. By describing the wrong building that Rob strongly thought was right, he proved beyond a doubt that he perceives mental reality as tangible.
It really blurs the line between inside and outside. We are so conditioned to think our thoughts are locked inside our skulls, totally private and invisible to the world. But in the session, Rob's thought was a giant orange, flat-roofed building that Seth could essentially walk right into and look around.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? If thoughts are that solid and visible to the inner senses, what kind of architecture are we building around ourselves every single day with our anxieties, our hopes, our daily assumptions?
That is the provocative thought I want to leave the listener with today.
Indeed. I want to ask you, the person listening right now, if your physical senses are just a learned habit, a biological camouflage system you've been wearing since infancy, what would you see if you could turn them off for just 5 seconds?
What is in the room with you right now that your root assumptions are actively filtering out? Are there colors you can't see? Sounds you're tuned not to hear? Or maybe there are thought forms floating around you like balloons?
It's a deeply fascinating question worth sitting with. The world is much more crowded and so much more interesting than our biology allows us to see on a daily basis.
And on that note, we are going to wrap up this deep dive. But please do not take our word for any of this. This is just one session, session 285 out of hundreds of incredibly detailed sessions.
The Seth material is vast, it's dense, it's remarkably funny at times, and it fundamentally changes the way you look at everything around you. We highly encourage you to study the books yourself.
You can find them and support the preservation of this incredible material by visiting the New Awareness Network website and bookstore at sethcenter.com/the early sessions. Again, that's sethcenter.com, the early sessions.
Go read the original text. It is absolutely worth the effort to see how these concepts unfold page by page.
Thanks for joining us in the deep end today. Keep questioning your root assumptions, everybody.
And remember, even if you get the building completely wrong, you might still be reading the mind perfectly right.
See you next time.